We're back, the Fly Racing GNCC post-race show, coming to you from the Unadilla GNCC round 10 of the 2012 Can-Am GNCC Series. And in my 8 years of coming to the GNCCs, I think this might be overall the craziest race we've ever had. Started out with an insane amount of riders and spectators, which ended up pushing the start of the morning race back 2 hours from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock, and then pushing the start of the afternoon race back another 2 hours as well till 3 o'clock. So that's why it's getting dark out now. We're just finishing this thing up. It's getting cold, so I'm going to try and wrap up one of the crazier days we've had in GNCC racing in quite some time as quickly as possible. So let's get right to it. In the XC1 Pro class, no surprise here, whole shot goes out to Paul Whibley, taking his 10th consecutive motorsport.com whole shot, which is just insane. And we had a whole trio of riders behind him. It's hard to even remember the positions changed so many times. We had, Charlie Mullins, Takeshi Koikita, Thad Duvall, Nate Canny, Chris Bach, Caleb Russell, all of these guys up in the front of that XC1 Pro class, and that order would be mixed up throughout the day. We saw some crazy stuff happen. They were running a railroad section. If anybody's ever raced Unadilla before, you'll remember the railroad section. It gets slippery. They were running it, and it was getting pretty gnarly down there, and so a lot of things happened in that section of the track. So the first couple laps, we saw the lead change a lot. We saw Whibley was out front. We had Takeshi Koikita running as high as second. We had Caleb Russell in that mix. We had Charlie Mullins eventually would take the lead. We had Thad Duvall in there as well, and then we had train of Chris Bach and Nate Canny behind these guys pushing, and they were staying just close enough that they looked like they could be part of the race. And then the crazy stuff started to happen. We had a bunch of riders get stuck in that railroad section of the track. We had people just leapfrogging each other, and eventually Charlie Mullins looked like he was going to be pulling away. He killed everybody at the last enduro, and then he ran into brake problems, had a rear brake issue, had to pull into the pits and have the entire rear brake assembly replaced. So that pretty much took him out of the equation. So that left Paul Whibley and Thad Duvall to start pulling out in front. Thad would lead, Paul would lead. We had Caleb in third for a while. Then Caleb ran into some issues. He dropped way back, maybe to fifth or sixth place. We had Koikita, who was running second or third, he got stuck. He dropped way back. Then we had Canny move into third, Bach into fourth, and Caleb Russell into fifth. And that was kind of the scenario that we saw heading into the later stages of the race. And Caleb got stuck the second to last lap. He kind of dropped off the pace. He was as far back as 45 seconds with 2 laps to go behind Canny and Bach, who kept swapping places between third and fourth. And then coming into the last lap, we ended up seeing that gap get shrunk, and then it looked like we were going to have a race coming down to the finish. But then Caleb started to pull away, and then he crashed on the uphill at the FMF PowerPoint, giving Nate Canny his first podium finish of the year. There's something special about this place for Nate. I talked to him before the race started, and he's not been happy with his year so far. And I asked him if he thought maybe this would be the place that could get a little mojo going. And he didn't want to say for sure, but if any place that this is going to do it, he can pull out some good results here. And it looked like the Nate Canny of old. He wasn't letting down. Him and Caleb came into the finish just battling super hard, and I was wondering if Caleb was going to kind of play spoiler there and ruin it, and he made a move at the next to last turn and just couldn't make it happen. But now that we've talked about that race for third, which was awesome, got to go back to the first place ride. Thad Duvall leading the race. It's been such a tough time for Thad. This is his 4th season in the XC1 class after winning those back-to-back titles in the XC2 Pro Lights class. Came in with so much hype and just wasn't able to live up to it. Lost his ride with Yamaha last year, didn't know what he was going to do, and now he was out front leading. But he had Paul Whibley behind him, and we know how often Paul Whibley can just come up and ruin your day. But it wasn't meant to be today for Paul. He ended up breaking off his rear brake lever sometime on that last lap, allowing Thad to just pull away and cruise into an easy win. No pressure for Thad down the stretch. So that was an amazing day for Thad. He hasn't been up on the box this year. He looked like he had one coming to him earlier in the year and ended up being docked. So to get his first win, his first podium on the Honda, I know it was a really big day for Thad and the Shenandoah Honda team. So with that, let's jump over to the XC2 Pro Lights class, which was another one that was pretty wild. Off the start, we saw Cody Gragg grab the whole shot, and it was Jason Thomas out front. And we had Greg running a really strong race in third for a long time, and he was holding on strong. Stuart Baylor was in second. Eventually, Stuart Baylor had the bead break on his rear tire, and which caused him to have to pull into the pits and swap a rear wheel, dropping him out of the race. And the whole time Jason Thomas was out front, we were keeping watch on Andrew DeLong, who started the first lap nearly 45 seconds behind the leaders with an awful start. And he was just working his way up. And finally, about halfway through the race, we saw that DeLong and Thomas, they had hooked up. They were racing. They jumped over the sky shot side by side, looking at each other. It was pretty intense. And then in this railroad section that I talked about before, Thomas buried his bike, and he did it right in front of DeLong. DeLong tried to go around him. He buried his bike. DeLong said on the podium that they were standing there looking at each other, right next to each other, but Andrew had made it further across the mud section, and he was able to get going and get out, which left him with a massive lead. He was minutes and minutes ahead of the rest of the competition, while Jason Thomas was stuck there in that mud pit, having to get winched out of the mud. And so that was pretty much the end of Thomas's day, especially for a podium finish. So he was able to get back going. Baylor was able to get going. Those guys were way back. So that left crazy mix of riders. Second place was Nick Davis for a long time. Then he had Scott Grills from the JG Off-Road Honda team in third, and Morgan Moss making his return to GNCC Racing first time this year in fourth. And by the time we got to the finish, the riders were starting to get so separated, and there were so many lappers out there. It was really hard to tell what was going on. But DeLong comes into the finish, takes a big lead, big win, gonna cut right into Stuart Baylor's points lead. Morgan Moss made his way around Nick Davis, who got stuck in the mud on the last lap, for second. Nick Davis finishes third, his first ever podium. That's two Husky bikes on the podium. So great job for that team. It was pretty cool to see Morgan up there with his former teammates. Things didn't really end so well there, but looked like they all kind of made amends. The FAR Husky guys were cheering for Morgan throughout the race, and so it was pretty cool to see. It was a pretty emotional podium. I think Andrew DeLong saw that this championship is still in reach, in grasp, and Morgan Moss gets his first podium. Nick Davis gets his first podium. There was a lot of tears and stuff. It was a pretty cool situation. And unofficially, we have Stuart Baylor in fourth, and after that we're not too sure. That, like we said, that we had some transponder issues. I think Nick Davis's wasn't reading, so they were manually adding riders in. Brad Bakken was in the mix for a while. I think he may have been fifth, and then I'm assuming maybe Jason Thomas sixth, but we're gonna have to check the results whenever they're posted. It'll be a little while after we get this show done, so you might already know it before you watch it. But all in all, it was a crazy weekend. We had just insane amount of lead changes. I've never seen that. Riders in the front of the pack that you wouldn't have expected. A first-time winner, 2 first-time podiums in the XC2 class, first podium of the year for Nate Canny on the Honda. It was a pretty cool day. A great comeback to GNCC Racing after a long summer off. So can only wait to see what happens in St. Clairsville. We're gonna have to wait a while though, because we have the 6 days coming up in a week. So a lot of the guys are heading off on Monday. Well, I personally will be heading off on Thursday, and we're going to be bringing you guys updates from all 6 days of racing. So be sure to stay tuned to digitaloffroad.com for more coverage of the GNCC Racing, and of course coverage of the 6 days, which is going to have a lot of the guys from the GNCC circuit out there. So that's it for now. We'll see you guys in a few weeks. Take it easy.